The action genre went through an interesting transition in the 90s. It still hadn't quite reached the CGI overload that would dominate the 21st century, but it was the last hurrah of practical effects. And yet, despite the technical limitations of the era, the 90s were still packed with exhilarating, fun, and even thoughtful action movies that still resonate today. We've run down the 10 best 90s action movies, and while there's some diversity in the subgenres, today I am going to show you 10 best action movies of the 90s. Before the video begins, please give it a like, and if you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin. 10. Total Recall 1990. Paul Verhoeven is a master of undefinable films. He delves eroticism, action, and science fiction with a heavily measured tongue-in-cheek satirical bent that is only matched by his unflinching regard for all things beyond the pale. Total Recall, which is one of his finest works, stars Arnold Schwarzenegger as your average Joe, a regular dude who goes to the local recall clinic, a place where you can have all the most wondrous memories implanted in your head, and ends up unlocking expertly repressed memories of his life as a secret agent. That pits him against a string of countless government agents, including his stand-in wife, Sharon Stone, as he sets out to bring down a nefarious, if somewhat vague, agency. Based on a Philip K. Dick short, Total Recall is lavish and ridiculous, a stronghold of Verhoeven's knack for the extravagant and his willingness to go for extremes. What it lacks in coherence, it makes up for in pure panache, as Verhoeven explores the wonders of a futuristic society by upending genre conventions as often as it indulges in them. 9. Terminator 2: Judgment Day, 1991. We should probably stop giving James Cameron flack for taking so damn long on these Avatar follow-ups, because if there's a man who knows how to make an action sequel, it's him. Hell, he practically defined the format in 1986 with Aliens, and in 1991, he put that bigger, badder formula to grand use in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Picking up with Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor 15 years after the events of the first film, we find a woman completely changed by what she experienced. Now a tough son of a bitch and ferocious mama bear devoted to protecting her son, the future leader of the human resistance. That's just one of the ways the script turns the original film on its head, the most famous being the reintroduction of Arnold Schwarzenegger's T-800, not as an unstoppable villain, but as a reprogrammed protector set against Robert Patrick's even scarier T-1000. 8. Demolition Man, 1993. Set aside Rob Schneider and the Three Seashells, and Demolition Man is perhaps one of the smartest, most subversive sci-fi films of the 1990s. It doesn't get credit for its subversion because it's putting Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes front and center. But if you look at the surrounding film, it's surprisingly crafty with its cultural critique of a future that will be overwhelmed with product placement and forced fuzzy feelings. Demolition Man provides a unique dystopia, one that's run by the mentality of a neighborhood association rather than a world falling into chaos. 7. The Fugitive, 1993. In the early 90s, Harrison Ford was intent on proving that while he was entering his 50s, his leading man days were far from over. The actor was just coming off his first turn as Jack Ryan in 1992's Patriot Games, when he signed on to lead a feature film adaptation of a television series called The Fugitive. Now on paper, this just sounded like a neat little action thriller, but it turns out Ford went and made one of the best films of the decade. Indeed, Ford's turn as a prominent doctor falsely convicted of murdering his wife is wonderfully dynamic and unsurprisingly intense. And as the title suggests, Dr. Richard Kimball escapes on his way to death row and finds himself pursued by a relentless U.S. Marshal played by Tommy Lee Jones. Director Andrew Davis frames the film as a non-stop action thriller with a strong mystery through line. And while there are certainly spectacular set pieces to be found, it's the deeply human performance of Ford and Jones that really make this thing soar. It's no wonder the film scored 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, and 1 win for Jones, Adam Chitwood. 6. True Lies, 1994. Part ballistic Arnold Schwarzenegger-fronted action, part domestic comedy. True Lies is lesser James Cameron, which means it's still fantastic because this is James Cameron after all. True, the film may not have redefined the genre as so many of Cameron's works tend to do, but it's a damn good time in a pleasing mishmash of genres. Framed as a Schwarzenegger piece that ultimately gave co-star Jamie Lee Curtis equal room to shine, the story follows Schwarzenegger's Harry Trasker, a special agent keeping his life secret from his nearest and dearest, including his wife, Helen Curtis, who we soon discover is seeking her own thrills. 5. Sudden Death, 1995. Die Hard imitators were a dime a dozen in the 90s, but Sudden Death is one of the most formula faithful and one of the best. It's best described as Die Hard on a hockey arena, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, and if you're not already sold, I'm not sure we're on the same page here. Van Damme leads as Darren McCord, a former firefighter traumatized by a tragedy in the field, who picks the worst night possible to bring his kids to the hockey arena he oversees as fire marshal. Enter Powers Booth, playing the Hans Gruber of the piece, a greedy military man named Joshua Foss who holds the vice president hostage and threatens to blow up the entire arena unless he gets his money. But Foss is a much more twisted villain than Gruber ever was, casually offing innocent civilians with glee and relishing every opportunity to torment McCord's captive young daughter, who he repeatedly mocks, threatens, and tries to kill. There's something about watching a full-grown man threaten to stuff a child's mouth full of spiders that sets a singular tone, somewhere between pitch darkness and over-the-top humor. 4. Mission Impossible, 1996. The Mission Impossible franchise is the ideal example of what a big-budget series of films should be, anchored by a series of stylish top-tier filmmakers and the unparalleled chutzpah of Tom Cruise. With the notable exception of the deeply flawed second installment, these films have given the likes of J.J. Abrams and Brad Bird open canvases to exercise their big-screen know-how. But it's never been as visually hypnotic and narratively caustic than in Brian De Palma's infectious original. On the hunt for the people responsible for the murders of his team, Cruise's Ethan Hunt must cross and double-cross government agencies and crime bosses ad nauseum. And De Palma takes the chance to stage the intrigue and astounding stunts with Hitchcockian verve. Perpetually in praise of the master of suspense, De Palma makes Mission Impossible his variation on the likes of Foreign Correspondent and other wrongman narratives, Young and Innocent, North by Northwest, etc. But it's not solely a work of homage. 3. Independence Day, 1996. Let's all forget the buzzkill sequel and remember Independence Day for the monument-exploding charisma fest we all fell in love with back in 1996. Before Roman Emmerich's apocalyptic spectacle devolved into a redundant shtick, he gave us an all-timer alien invasion actioner, and it was anchored by an exceptionally charming, nonchalantly inclusive cast long before diversity became the buzzword. You just can't beat Judd Hirsch's nervous nagging, or Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum's tireless bickering as they fly off into impossible odds. Obviously, you can't beat Bill Pullman delivering what remains one of the best cinematic St. Crispin speeches of all time. 2. Blade, 1998. Blade certainly isn't the best vampire movie to come out of the 90s, but it is one of the most kick-ass. An action-packed comic book adaptation ahead of its time, Blade recruits genre icon Wesley Snipes as the titular hybrid mercenary on a mission to rid the world of an evil vampire scourge. From a screenplay by David S. Goyer, who would later help establish Gritty and Grounded as the order of business for the DC Universe with the Dark Knight trilogy and Man of Steel, Blade integrates vampire culture believably into the underworld of contemporary society with a goth raver bent that makes them seem like a bunch of bloodthirsty tools. Basically, you really just can't wait for Blade to kick the shit out of them all. 1. The Matrix, 1999. Though it came at the tail end of the decade, opening in late March of 1999, the Wachowski siblings' neoclassic sci-fi flick completely changed the game for movies that would come after it. The technology and techniques for the now iconic bullet time sequences weren't invented for this film, but they were certainly pulled into the modern era, putting the effect on display for audiences around the world. This could easily have been written off as a gimmick, which indeed it was for future films that aped its style. But thanks to a solid, thought-provoking, and at times mind-bending mythology, The Matrix remains one of the best movies of the 1990s. Thank you for watching, and please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and enable post alerts to view more of our future videos. After saying that, keep watching our videos, and I'll speak with you in the next one.